Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. The Tenpenny Files has daily conversations to inform and educate, not just to entertain. I come prepared, and then we let the discussion unfold unnaturally with people worth hearing on topics worth exploring. If it matters to your body, your freedom, or your future, we talk about it here. Each day, I have conversations with authors and documentary filmmakers and independent thinkers whose work challenges mainstream messaging. We cover a wide range of topics, so there's something here for everyone. We talk about government and politics and astronomy and pets and food, farming and fitness. We talk about vaccines and health policy. And once a week, we have conversations with authors who write about faith and biblical principles. The goal is to introduce you to topics you've never heard of before or topics you always wish you had time to explore, but you didn't know where to begin. Let our guests show you the way. Follow their work, get their books, and dive in. Join me here daily, every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Tenpenny Files as we hear from voices who've been ignored, silenced, or censored, but truly have something to say. But before we begin today's episode, I want to invite everyone to please become a Tenpenny Prime member. Prime members get exclusive monthly content, recorded presentations, and an Ask the Expert masterclass that I bring in the top experts for you to have direct conversations with them and get your questions answered. To learn more, go to primemembership.drtenpenny.com, primemembership.drtenpenny.com, and support our work. For those, and one last thing before we begin today's conversation, for those who listen regularly to this show, I started show kind of with the same little running monologue. That's because we're growing rapidly and there's new people joining us every day that want to know what this show is about. So I want to say welcome to new listeners, and I'm very grateful for those of you who join us regularly. Now, with that, let's get started. Today's conversation is with Catherine Austin Fitts to talk about central bank digital currencies and a whole list of other political and current hot topics. Catherine, my friend, it's so good to see you, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. Thanks for joining me here.
It's so good to see you. And I want you to know I've been so looking forward to the chance to talk with you. It's hard to get to talk to you because you're such a busy person. But I was thinking about the fact that we were going to be in cahoots again and in this interview. And I thought back and I remembered the first year of the pandemic, hearing your voice when you said, I think it was 450 interviews. You'd done 450 interviews in 1 year. Do you
With,
remember?
with 600.
600. Okay. Well, clearly I talked to you before the end of the year, so maybe you were halfway through. Anyway, but the thing I remember was we were trying to prove that it was stupid to wear masks.
Right.
And I said to you, look, can you give me a survey of the literature on this? Because you were saying the literature says it's stupid to wear masks. And you came back with what I can only describe as the like biblical encyclopedia of mask studies. Do you remember?
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was a thing of beauty. And I remember thinking, and it was so devastating. I mean, it just destroyed any possibility that the mask policy made sense other than as a political and economic hit. It was amazing. I was overwhelmed by it. And I think you'd spent like 27 hours working straight to do it or something. And I looked at it and I said, this is a great doctor. This is what great doctors do. This is how they save lives. So my father was a doctor and he had a reputation of saving cases, saving people's lives when they'd been declared hopeless. And he used to come home from work and he would stay up all night reading books and calling all over the world. It was before the internet, trying to find, out of the box solutions for somebody who's trying to save. And when I looked at your mask study, you just so reminded me of him. It's like my father plus the internet. Oh my God.
For that. I just did I spoke at a meeting in Idaho a couple of weeks ago, and they wanted me to speak on because they've heard me say this on interviews. I talk about the gifts of COVID. So they wanted me to do this whole conversation about the gifts of COVID. And the middle part's or the beginning was scientific. The middle part was meant to be humorous because we have to laugh at ourselves for the crazy things we did. And then
Right.
it was at a mega church conference, so it was more a scriptural at the end. But the middle part, I'd found all of these pictures of people during COVID doing things like kissing each other with masks on, and sitting behind plexiglass like that was supposed to protect us, and the little stamps on the floor 6 feet apart because the virus would come out of your mouth and go exactly 6 feet and drop to the floor. And I said, of course, we still see this one. And the last one was a guy in his car by himself driving around with a mask and gloves on. And we still see it. We still see people, you travel a lot. We still see people in airports with masks on, and you see people occasionally in a store. And I just don't know what to say about that. I just don't.
What I say is neuro warfare.
I guess you're right.
Right, neuro warfare.
Well, let's start. We've got so many things that we could talk about. We could do this for 3 hours. Unfortunately, we're sort of have a time constraint. So let's start with some current topics. I heard you in a recent interview say that the city of London is really what shut down the Straits of Hormuz. Uh,
Well, they did the first shutdown. So, it was triggered by pulling of insurance, starting with the U.S. Torpedoing, or I forget exactly how it happened, but destroying an Iranian ship that had come in for exercises outside of Sri Lanka. And it was right at that point, I'm told, the City of London started to pull their maritime insurance or dramatically increase the prices. And so I would say the first wave of shutdown came from the city and the insurance industry in the city. But then of course we have the war itself interfering. So both the Iranians and what was happening at the war stopping the travel through.
but didn't Trump say that we would pay for that and we would use military ships to escort other ships through the Straits?
Yes, at one point he said that. And so here's the $64,000 question, because I think what you're looking at is COVID 2.0.
Hmm.
I'll be blunt. I just think this is COVID 2.0.
Explain
But
it.
what?
Explain why you think that.
So because if you want, I mean, you're looking at economic warfare, number one, but also you're looking at economic warfare that is basically implementing the same thing that COVID did, which is you dramatically centralize control of strategic resources and and shut down the weak or the small guys so that you can centralize and consolidate power. Okay. Now, if you one of the reasons this war is happening, remember Wesley Clark said we were going to attack 7 countries in 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the last of those 7 countries is Iran, and those countries were leakage in the central banking system. So if you wanted to implement an all digital control grid through the financial transaction system, you needed those countries in the model. And in fact, they've imploded and sort of gotten control of each one of those countries, and Iran is the last one. And that's part of what you need if you're going to move forward with implementing what I call programmable money in the digital control grid. So Iran is leakage in the central banking system, and that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is, you have the United States who wants to be the multipolar power. They've shed their multipolar obligations. So they're saying, okay, we're not going to spend any money on being the global policeman, but we're going to be the unipolar bully. And you have the BRICS nation saying, we want to be a multipolar world, and we don't want to be controlled or dramatically drained economically by a unipolar bully. So we're going to do the BRICS payment system. And so there's real tension between what the BRICS are trying to do and what the US is trying to do. And of course, the Gulf is in the middle of it because the question is who controls the energy. Now, the United States has done tremendous work in trying to build energy self-sufficiency. And so if you look at its net supply, we are pretty much protected from this shutdown. Other countries, for example, Japan or the Philippines, are very, very vulnerable. Um, but if you look at the balance of power globally, the US relatively is put in the catbird seat by this kind of shutdown. And it's interesting, you would have laughed. One of the economic spokesperson people for the White House said the other day on an interview, oh, US economy will be fine because we're net surplus energy. The consumer won't be, but the economy will be fine. So now it's a billionaire economy. We don't care how the consumers are.
Actually said that?
Yeah, you said that. We cut out the clips, so I'm just about to record our news trends and stories. We do a quarterly wrap up and an annual wrap up where we do a long review of the top stories, and I have about 60 video clips, 1 minute or less that I show, and that's going to be one of the video clips because it's priceless. He says the economy is going to be fine, the consumers will be in trouble, but the economy will be fine. So
Yes.
you're no longer a consumer, you're compost. The one of my favorite videos from the annual wrap up, not last year but the year before, was Larry Fink saying, "We've changed the economic model so we can grow with a shrinking population."
Oh God. Speaking of checklists, on the Solari website, you have a checklist of Trump events that are just it's endless. And it's just of what you cataloged. And I've heard you say many times in interviews that Trump was put in place to
Right.
build the control grid. Talk about some of those things on that checklist. And
So if you look at the digital control grid, there are three main parts. Okay. The first is the digital ID because it's very important. If I'm going to control everybody and everything with AI and machines, I have to be phenomenally precise that Sherri Tenpenny is Sherri Tenpenny and Catherine Austin Fitts is Catherine Austin Fitts. And I can aggregate all the data and all the databases around them. So identity is essentially perfect. So you need that kind of high quality. And those databases and that database operation needs to be interoperable globally since it's a global model. Okay. And that means we need very high quality digital ID systems. Now, the different syndicates, the different cartels compete to be that digital ID system. So the healthcare guys want the vaccine passports to be the digital ID system, and the tech brothers have their version, and Bill Gates has his version. So you're seeing a lot of competition. But essentially, the big stopper on the digital ID was the conservatives. They knew how dangerous the digital ID was, and they tried to push it in the Patriot Act, and everybody on the conservative side has fought it, fought it, fought it, fought it, fought it for years at both the federal and state level. But I came to the conclusion during the campaign that Trump was being put in to use election fraud and immigration as the excuse to promote and lock up the digital ID system because of course you always want to fund it with taxpayers' money. You want to put people in a digital concentration camp and make them pay for it, right? And if you see how they're using immigration and election fraud, watch Steve Miller because Steve Miller is the sort of the linchpin in the administration for trying to basically tear up the Constitution and put all these things in place. Anyway, so or at least that's my impression. So it was clear to me that Trump was going to use those two things, and that's exactly what's happening. I mean, if you look at what's happening with the Safe Act, it's not going to it's going to bring much less fair elections. It's going to mess up the voting even worse. But what it's going to do is it's going to help that digital ID system.
why is it going to mess up things even worse? I don't think people are aware of that.
Yeah, if you look at all the people whose IDs will not work for to vote, they're basically going to be shut out to vote. So you've got a lot of people who are going to have to go through a lot of hoops to create new IDs, and a lot of people from what I've been listening to are going to get shut out. I mean, it you don't need these bills. So we had good elections before digital technology. We had borders that worked before digital technology. And you have all these excuses why we need more digital technology, and every time we get more digital technology, we get more central control. Okay? So the whole story is BS. We
Hmm.
we don't need more digital technology. We need less criminality and less lawlessness, right? So, I mean, we have all the laws in the books at the federal government to get things to work and to enforce any criminality that's going on, but we don't. There's 21 trillion missing from the federal government. Has anybody pursued it or gotten it back or prosecuted somebody for stealing it? No. Has anybody been prosecuted for Epstein? No. So no, we don't need digital IDs to make children safe online because pedophiles are roaming free, you know. right? And if somebody is caught doing pedophilia, they can run to Israel and they'll be safe there. Really? So come on. We don't need more laws. We need to enforce the good laws we have.
You've said, I've heard you say that this current administration is the most corrupt and it had the largest amount of grift that you've ever seen. And you've been in politics for a long time. You even mentioned in a recent interview that it's more than 21 trillion. It's more like 55 trillion.
Well, so let's go back to 1998. There's 20 from 1998 to 2015. There's 21 trillion missing from DOD and HUD. During the bailouts between 2006 and 2012, there were 29 trillion of bailouts. Some people say, well, some of it got paid back, whatever, but I'll use 29. If I made you an interest-free loan of $1 billion for 2 years, I do, sir, you could make a little money with it. So, anyway, so that's 21 trillion plus 29 trillion. That's 40, 50 trillion. Then during the going direct reset during COVID, you injected 5 trillion directly, and that's not even counting quantitative easing. Now we're up to 55 trillion. That's a lot of money,
Oh,
right?
I hear.
Right.
I saw.
But here's the thing: the federal government has been run outside the laws related to financial management since 1998. Now, we got to 2017, and Dr. Skidmore and I published a report on the 21 trillion missing, a complete survey that he and his students had done, and a complete description of it, all the documentation from the federal, because that 21 trillion number doesn't come from me or from Dr. Skidmore. It comes from the federal financial statements and information. So this is from federal government documentation of their finances. And each year they refuse to produce audited financial statements as required by law. So in 2017, after we published it, there was a big hullabaloo and an argument about why the DOD kept, they'll say they're going to produce an audit in 8 years and then they don't. It's another 8 years and then they don't. Anyway, so the final result of that was under the Trump administration, the first one in 2018, in October. And I will tell you, Sherri, I don't think the pandemic could have happened without this. In October 2018, the Trump administration and the House and the Senate, Republican and Democrat, all together agreed on a policy called Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board Statement 56. Okay. Now that's a name that could put you to sleep, right? Okay. Okay. So you know what that policy said? I'm going to grossly summarize it. And we have a major piece on the Solari report on what this is and how it works. Basically said that a secret group of people, by a secret process, could take a portion of the government finances and move it into a secret compartment and not include it in the financial statements and um, and uh, uh, and that way, and it would apply not just to the 24 covered agencies, but 150 related government entities. Which means if you go to the financial statements of the U.S. government, they are entirely meaningless because you don't know what's in and you don't know what's out, and you don't know why it's out or who did it. It's just like we're in La La Land. Now, let me explain what that means to you and your 401k and your IRA. That means that all the stocks and bonds for large cap, because with the classification laws and the defense laws, national defense laws, it then umbrellas and includes the big banks and government contractors and IT firms doing work with the government. Okay, they can keep some or their books secret as well, right? So now what you've got is you have the majority, in my opinion, of the large cap bonds and stock market in the United States, everything's secret. Their financial statements, in my opinion, I don't know what to make of them. I don't look at those. I have an investment screen, and none of those stocks get on my screen. And the reason they don't get approved for their screen is I don't know what their financial statements mean. I don't know how to analyze them. I used to always read the federal budget and finances. I don't anymore. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Wow.
Right. And it's not just me. If you look at the judges and the courts have reached a point where they don't believe, When I first had to litigate against the Department of Justice and they would falsify evidence and they would lie, the judges assumed that they were telling the truth. They would always give the government the benefit of the doubt. The judges don't do that anymore. They know the Department of Justice and the government lies to them all the time. They don't trust them. They don't believe them. I just read the decision that a DC judge made on the lawsuit. The the DC U.S. attorney sued the Federal Reserve and Jay Powell on criminal charges, and then the Fed moved to quash the subpoenas. And the judge's decision was one of the funniest things I've ever read. And between the lines, what it says is, you guys are a joke. You're all clowns. Nothing you say means anything. It's a joke. The whole thing's a joke. You're a joke. And they quashed the subpoenas and they just said, "Psst."
Wow.
I know, it was amazing.
That is,
Well, if you see what's going on in the courts around ICE, it's frightening. And you know, uh, ICE was promised to us as, and we'll get back to the three parts of the control grid. ICE was promised to us that they were going to go after hardened criminals. But in May of 2025, Steve Miller says we want quotas. So you have a new organization that's growing fast. If you listen to the testimony that one of the attorneys left ICE and then reported what was happening, they cut the training way down, right? And they're growing fast. They're cutting the training way down, and they put on quotas that are way too many. They want a certain amount of rest per day and per month, and it's a huge quota. And the way they can make the quota is instead to go after moms, to go after kids, to show up at the schools, to show up, at places where it's easy to round people up, instead of going after the hardened criminals are hard to go after, and there's risk involved. It's dangerous. So instead of going in the hardened criminals, they're trying to meet the quota and they're just rounding people up. And now you've got the kind of hullabaloo. And that's when people started to get shot. Now, it's funny because during that time, just coincidence, I went back and there was a new documentary about the reporter who broke the story about My Lai. And I had completely forgotten this. The reason the sort of genocide happened at My Lai during the Vietnam War was Westmoreland had put on huge quotas, and the only way they could make the quotas was to kill civilians. You
wow.
know, because the North Vietnamese would run and hide in the jungle, but it's easy to drop in a village and kill 300 civilians, and you make your quota.
Wow. I just saw on Instagram, somebody sent me of thing this morning of an ICE guy that just got an ICE employee, or what do you call him, ICE officer, got on an airplane and started taking people off an airplane.
Citizens. One of them was a policeman.
Yes.
Citizens, right?
And the one guy, he got off, he said, yes, my mother was a Mexican, but I was born here. And he was like in his 30s. He said, I've lived here my whole life. I'm a naturalized citizen. I was born here. And they're just taking people off the airplanes. It's like, it's really crazy of how many people are getting.
So it's worse because I was just emailing with a great sheriff. So, some of the greatest people in America are the sheriff, and you know how great sheriffs during the pandemic really protected people. Under the Constitution, the sheriff is the ultimate constitutional authority in any place. They are trying to get states to pass legislation that puts the sheriff under the control of ICE.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
bad.
right. That's trying to, and you know who's calling the governor and pushing these things? Steve Miller, same guy who put on the quotas.
Whew, well, that's a lot to digest. I want to make one comment before we're going to take a quick station break here. When you were talking about the $1 trillion, I remember seeing a graphic years ago that described what $1 trillion was. And they took $100 bills. It was a kind of a cartoonish type of thing. They took $100 bills, they stacked up $100 bills, said this is 1,000, then this is 1,000,000, then this is what so this is what $1,000,000 bills look like, which is like a little stack. So you thought you were so rich. And then they would go to 100 million, then a billion, then 100 billion. And then they said, now, are you ready for this? And the next graphic was $1 trillion, which was like 7 feet tall and about the size of a football field. And underneath it, it says, keep this picture in your mind when the government starts talking about, 5 trillion, 10 trillion, 21 trillion, 55 trillion, what
Right.
it really means, and to put it into terms that people could really visually see and begin to understand that it's just completely overwhelming, impossible.
There is no reason for children to have poor nutrition, to have poor health care, for anybody to be homeless. Extreme poverty is, or the great poisoning of America is not necessary. It's just not necessary. And and I will just ask you one question back to COVID 2.0. The US military gets $1 trillion a year, and anyone who has ever managed to reserve currency knows their number one job is to protect and control the sea lanes. So you're telling me for $1 trillion a year that the United States military can't keep the Straits of Hormuz open up against a country that's been living under severe sanctions for decades? Really? Do you believe that?
Well, all of it is hard to believe, Catherine. All magic or something, black magic going on. So hold that thought right there. We're going to take a short commercial break to hear from our sponsors for AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays the 10 Penny Files on iHeartRadio Network daily, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. You can also listen anywhere in the world if you go to AmericaOutloud.news and listen through their media player. And if you've missed any of these great conversations, and boy, we have had some wonderful ones, the 10 Penny Files, and it's the 10 Penny Files, can be found on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, iTunes, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studio, and on my platforms. I think the easiest place to find our podcast is go to dr10penny.com, hover over the podcast tab, and you will see a drop-down window. And about halfway down, it says all podcasts. You can't miss it. So you click on that, you can see all the podcasts that we've done in the last 6 months, and they're added more every day. The very first tab there tells you the interviews that will be aired that particular week. So with so many great books and documentaries and so little time in our busy lives to read and to watch, this show is meant to maximize your interest and jumpstart your time. We will have a great message coming up from our sponsors. Listen closely, sit tight. We will be right back with more great conversations with Catherine Ostrin Fitz. We will be right back. Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out, the heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to dr10penny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words: many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Today's conversation is with Catherine Ostrin Fitz, an accelerated independent thinker, to warn about the central bank digital currency that we haven't even gotten to yet, Catherine.
Okay, so we said there are three parts to the control grid, and you mentioned the collection that we have at the Solari report. When the new administration started, I had said that Trump was being put in to build a control grid, but I never dreamed that they would hit the deck running and move as fast as they did. Even I was, and it was funny, I was doing interviews each week, and the list was getting so long of the things they'd done, I started to forget items. So I said, okay, we have to keep a list. And so then we started updating it every week, and it's grown into this huge collection. Anyway, so one is the digital ID. So we just talked about that. But then the second is programmable money. And some people, the programmable money, which is issued by the central bank, is often referred to as CBDC. But now we have stable coins and digital tokens and other forms of crypto, which is think of this as a privately issued central bank digital currency because it comes with a private face, but behind it, you have government policies that implement and can implement any rule system, the CBDC could do. So it's funny because if you look at who the likely big issuers of those crypto are going to be, it's the banks that own the central bank. So it's kind of like meet the new boss, same as the old boss. But now you have a private face. And if you remember Twitter, the censorship through Twitter, the government's telling them what they're going to censor, and then they're censoring, and the government's telling you, well, they're a private organization, they can do whatever they want, right? So you had this little public-private game to get the worst of both worlds. And it was a way of pulling off censorship without it being overtly the government, or the central bank. Anyway, so programmable money is money where the rules of how and where you can use that money are embedded right into the currency. So right now, if you take a $10 bill and go, nobody can change, nobody can instruct that $10 bill, oh, you can't buy pizza. Or if Sherri leaves her 15-minute city, it won't work outside of her 15-minute city. But with digital money, you can program not only thousands of rules into the money, but you can make it dynamic. So I have you under surveillance, and if you're not good, I can punish you, or I can charge you fees, or I can increase your taxes. So it's a very dynamic system. And so we have been working with legislation to put up guardrails to say you can't use programmable money to strip people of their fundamental constitutional rights. So you can't turn off their money if you don't like what they said on social media, or you can't fine them, automatically if you don't like what they said on social media. So a lot of people know the concept of the Chinese social credit system. What we're saying is you can't use a social credit system to strip people of their constitutional rights, and you can't force them to use programmable money. You have to give them an option other than that if they don't want to use your programmable money. If it's voluntary, fine. And so this is just the idea of putting up guardrails so that financial transactions can't be used to do super controls, whether it's from private parties or the government or both. And anyway, so we have model legislation, and we've been working with states and various activists to try and implement this. And it's important because if you look at the speed at which now the volume of crypto outstanding is going to go up, it's going to be extraordinary. And of course, all of it can be programmable, whether it's whether it's stable coins with dollars or stable coins with gold or stable coins with euros or whatever. You've got to put those guardrails on because this is money that's going to be run by machines. So we have digital IDs, we have programmable money. The third thing we have is the hardware infrastructure you need to make all of this go. And at the heart of the infrastructure, in addition to telecommunications and satellites, of course, are the data centers. So what is AI good at? AI is great at tracking and implementing things that can be expressed mathematically. So financial transactions and spatial control. So what you're looking at in those data centers are the big brains that will run the surveillance and control system. That's what they're there for. They're not there to make businesses more efficient. They're not there to suddenly make, our world more intelligent. They are there to control you and me. And not only are they there to control you and me, but to do it in a way where we're financing it. We're paying to build our own control grid because this system will be run by the machines. You're talking about so much data and so much surveillance and analysis in real time that it needs to be, essentially run by AI. So, and in that system, you have the Flock cameras. Do you know about Flock? So Flock is a company that's doing deals with city council all over the country and counties to implement license plate readers so that they can track everybody where they're going, what they're doing. The cars now all have cameras so they can watch you while you're driving. They can track everything you're doing. They can record it, ship it back to a variety of places. It's one of the reasons they want to kill switch, because if you're not good, they can also turn off your car or turn off your electricity. So it's not just turn off your money, turn off your power. So, and then the final thing is going to be drones and robots, because you're not going to be dealing necessarily with the local sheriff. You're going to be dealing with a team of humanoid robots made by Tesla, who are going to work for the local sheriff's office or whatever the enforcement is. They're going to work for ICE. ICE ultimately will be replaced by robots, is what I expect. So, well, no, it's very dystopian, and you've got autonomous weapons. If you look at the Palantir system, the Palantir system, if you look at the Lavender system in Gaza, it was designed, in fact, so that the software picked the targets. And so if the target represented an international crime, there was no IDF officer who was legally responsible
Wow.
because the software picked the, yeah. So you're going to have a system which is run by AI, and it's going to have robot and drones. And so if it makes a mistake and kills a human, nobody's responsible legally.
Wow. How, with the central bank digital currency, and I know you've been talking about this for several years now, how close are we to full implementation of that?
So don't think about central bank digital currency, because what they're going with in the United States and other countries, they're going with the central bank digital currency. They're going with stable coins and digital tokens and Bitcoin and crypto, and it's going to be much more dangerous than CBDC, because the central banks have public responsibilities. They have an obligation to the public by law. They have disclosure responsibilities. The way they're setting up stablecoins and digital tokens, they're going to have a public-private interface. It's going to be programmable money, and potentially it's far more dangerous. So, oh yeah. So Circle, the Genius Act passed last year to implement stablecoins, and we have a great briefing on our financial transaction freedom website. We do a briefing every month for legislators. We have a great briefing on stablecoins, which will help you get an education. But the Genius Act proposed regulations just came out in February, and they hope to finalize them by the end of the year. They're currently negotiating the Clarity Act, and when that passes with its regulations, it will oversee essentially digital assets, which they're planning on digitizing the whole stock and bond market and trading it through the crypto rails, just like they're planning on trading, the currency market through the stablecoin through the crypto rails. So, here's the traditional financial system, whether it's currency or stocks and bonds, and they're planning on creating a whole new crypto version that will give them the ability to do things which are going to be pretty wild. So, Larry Fink has said he wants to trade the stock and bond markets with tokens. Let's say you take $250 trillion of global stocks and bonds, you somehow create tokens to represent them, and you proceed to trade them outside of the traditional securities laws. Coinbase has said that and this is going to do 24/7. So we're going to go to a stock market that's global and it's open 24/7 without interruption. And imagine the games you can play. And Coinbase has said they're going to offer 20 times margin. So imagine how many young people they can strip mine with that kind of gambling model.
What's happening right now with the gold and silver market? I mean, silver's tanked by 50% over the last couple of months, and gold is down by more than $1,000 an ounce. And usually it's in time of war that you see those skyrocket.
No, you usually see them go down during war. War is very deflationary to precious metals, in part because, people liquidate the paper market, which is a big price leader, and then and some people have to liquidate hard metal to get cash. So traditionally, war scenarios or the fear of war is very deflationary. It's been that way ever since I've started following it in 2000. I never followed precious metals, so I've been following it for about 26 years. But so that's typical. It's deflationary, and if this keeps going for much longer, it could be even more. I look at it and I'm like, oh, good, a sale. So if you don't have your core position, if you go to Solari, we have a great old piece called What Percentage of My Assets Should I Have in Precious Metals? And we divide your investment in a core piece and an investment piece. If you don't have your core piece, a sale is a great time to get your core piece. So I always believe you shouldn't wait, just get your core piece. And of course, I was buying silver until it shot up, and I was saying for the last 2 years, silver's on sale. It's so great. I'm buying silver. And then, then it shot up, and I had to stop. And then, boom, now I'm going to go back in, and I'm waiting to see when I'm going to go back in. But, my read on gold and silver is if you look at the bullion market from everything I can tell, the demand continues to be dramatic of people acquiring bullion. I mean, the Chinese are selling treasuries and buying gold and silver. So the long-term trend is clearly we're in a bull market, but war could be very deflationary, and I don't know how much they could take it down. I was wondering if it would bottom out at about 4,300, but I haven't looked at it today. I'll look now, but certainly yesterday when I looked at the charts, it hadn't bottomed, in my opinion. Oh, I say that and it's flying up $153.
Um,
So I'll see what the charts say.
Silver today is, I think, it's $63, and they were projecting that to go to $300 to $400 because silver is something that's used in electronics, and
Right. Silver right now, so gold right now is 45.30 and silver is 70.79.
that went up
Yeah,
almost.
it's $2 and it's up $2.90.
Well, this morning earlier when I looked at it, it was like 65.
My guess is, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but because my expectation is this could go on for quite a long time, but if the Trump administration finds an off ramp and finds a way to end this or get out of it, you could really see gold fly up. So,
and,
the question is how long will
and
war is going to be deflationary to gold and silver. The other thing is Powell in his um, when he announced the last meeting, he indicated he was not going to be adverse if he had to increase interest rates because inflation is now a very big problem, and it's going to get worse. And if you're the central bank, if you want to curtail inflation, you're going to take interest rates up, and that can be very negative for precious metals prices in the short run.
wow. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left here in our conversation. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about the pesticide immunity bills. Because the pesticide immunity bills, they keep moving them around to be so that they can slip them in different places. And I heard you.
So I had a great interview with Alexandra Munoz, who's the toxicologist, who did a fabulous job in both North Carolina and Tennessee of educating legislators to the dangers of this. And we had her on Financial Rebellion, and towards the very end of the show, she's a very careful, measured scientist. So not, she's a scientist. She's very technical and very studious and serious. And we get to the end, and she says, because you could see she's realizing she hasn't quite gotten through to, it's Polly and Carolyn and me. And she says, you have to understand if they get this and then they do what they say they're going to do, I consider that an extinction level event. She said, because of the impact on fertility, I will consider that an extinction level event.
Wow,
Right.
that's it's very chilling.
Right. So you've heard me talk for years about the great poisoning. I have no doubt in my mind that this is intentional. This is depopulation. I mean, if you look at the famine that's going to come off of what is happening in the Middle East, I mean, you're talking about shutting down the fertilizer industry in Europe coming into the spring planting. And for the last year, the Trump administration has slashed or killed billions in funding for food insecure people in the United States and food insecure people around the world. So now that we've slashed billions of dollars of funding for the food insecure globally, we're going to destroy the fertilizer industry in Europe before the spring planting, and we're going to so raise prices on fertilizer in the United States that a lot of farmers can't afford to plant, right? So what do you think that's going to look like especially for countries that are running out of energy. So this is COVID 2.0, but the potential for famine is very, very real, including in the food insecure countries.
Well, they didn't get the depopulation that they had intended when they with the COVID jabs. It's still, the death rate is still going. It hasn't stopped just because COVID isn't flying around. We are still seeing the died suddenlies and people dying of cardiomyopathies and myocarditis and chronic renal failure is a huge thing that people are dying from that nobody's really talking about. It's a really, really big thing. And what are they doing with all of these organs that they keep harvesting? The number
I
four
don't know.
number four cause of death in Canada now. I read it today. The number four cause of death is the medical assisted suicide. And
Right.
I had on my show a couple weeks ago, Yanya Kellick in his book Killed for Hire about the organ harvesting industry in China. And it's terrible what's happening to the
Well, have you just seen in Oklahoma, they just and Illinois, the legislature is trying to pass bills that say you can use human remains as compost.
Yes, there's about 40 there's 26 states that already have that, that when people die, that they can cremate them and put their ashes into the water and just goes everywhere. They already have that passed in a lot of
Right.
about that. Well, Catherine, in the last few minutes that we have here today, what is your takeaway? And tell us a little bit about the Solari report and how people can get involved with what you're doing.
So we're having a blast. It's hard. I'll never forget when my pastor in Washington said, the devil can have my house and the devil can have my job and the devil can have my car, but the devil cannot have my joy. And that's when I realized, that I had permission from God to be happy no matter how bad things were. It's the joy of the Lord. Anyway, we have been working to gather, the people who are committed to freedom together. I'm traveling and I'm doing a lot of meet and greets. We just had an unbelievable event in Switzerland that was so awesome. And you forget when you get 15 people like you and me together, I mean, it's just suddenly I mean, you get up there, with the angels is the only way I can describe it. But we just started a program called the Young Builders where it was for kids 18 to 28. And it was to take our building wealth curriculum and see if we could use our building wealth curriculum to really help young people navigate this environment and be successful at having families, at having great business, family enterprise, and being successful despite everything going on. And so we're about two-thirds the way through the first class, and it's been a huge success. And I think one of the reasons it's a huge success is these young people are so wonderful. And when they find each other, it's like, wow, it's just 2 + 2 = 25. Anyway, so it's been really fun. And one of our focuses is to grow that. So whether it's building wealth in the subscriber base, and this really, this was the subscribers' idea because they were like, you got to help my kids. You got to help my kids. So we started this at 18 to 28, and now they're saying you got to help us down to when we start homeschooling. So we're trying to figure out how we can take it down. And at some point, we want to grow it into a university, but we have to turtle. We have to do it step by step. So I have to tell you, I'm a great believer that the control grid is going to fail. I, I don't I don't begin to underestimate the pain and suffering and the mess that they can make before it fails. But if we're going to have an advanced civilization, we have to build that. And if we're going to have one that's embedded in divine principles and freedom, we're going to have to build that. And you build that one child at a time, one young person at a time. And it's wonderful to be with the young builders because they're going to build this, not me. And so what I'm focused on is how can I help them be successful at building a real civilization? That's because I don't want to live in a primitive civilization. I want to live in a very sophisticated, advanced civilization that uses all this wonderful, powerful technology to make life wonderful, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
As one of my allies used to say, We're willing for things to work.
Really, really true. Well, Catherine, tell people where they can hook into
So,
the.
yeah, so you can find us at solari.com, solari.com. So it's solar and then add an I.com. We'd love to have you as a subscriber. We would, sign up. We have a free newsletter, sign up and plug in. There's huge amount of content. And, if you come in, our tagline is live a free and inspired life. And that's what we want to help you do. We want you to live a free and inspired life. And we know you're on your way to doing that because you're listening to Dr. Tenpenny, which speaks very well of your good taste.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I know that the time zones, because you live in Europe, can be a little bit dicey. So thank you so much for being with us. And thanks to all the listeners for being with us here today. And you'll want to listen to this over again because it was packed with great information. And be sure to share it with others so they know that we're here and we can help us to grow. So with that, I want to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close all of my podcasts with, whether it is live or pre-recorded. I close with Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in trouble, and be persistent in prayer. All of those things should resonate with everyone. Remember to lean into God, trust Him for everything. He won't let you down, even though His timeline may not be your timeline. He's always there with you. So join us tomorrow or the next time right here on AmericaOutloud.news and iHeartRadio. You can listen to all the rest of our podcasts. I still say the best way to find it is to go to dr10penny.com. And while you're there, click on all those tabs and see what else that we do there because it's a busy place and we do a lot. But go to dr10penny.com, hover over the podcast tab, and scroll down to where it says all podcasts. You can find it right there. And so we will see you again here tomorrow or the next time on the Tenpenny Files. Have a great day, everybody. Goodbye and God bless.